He was known everywhere as a man who never slowed down people, spoke about his money, his companies, his tall buildings and long lists of success magazines, wrote about his sharp mind and fearless decisions. Employees feared his silence more than his. Angered to the world, he was complete, but inside the large house where lights stayed on, even at midnight, the man often felt empty. That night was no different. He returned home later than usual. The car rolled through the gates. Quietly, security nodded as always the doors opened to the same calm silence. The house was too big for one man. The walls were clean, the floors shined, and everything looked perfect. Yet something always felt missing. He loosened his tie, slowly. His shoulders were heavy. Another long day of meetings, numbers, arguments, and pressure. Another day where time ran faster than he could catch its staff. Greeted him politely and stepped back. Dinner was ready but untouched. He waved his hand and walked past the table. Food no longer mattered. Much neither did comfort. He walked toward his study as usual. That room was his safe place, say. Place filled with files, screens, and plans, say. Place where he felt in control, but as he passed the hallway, something made him stop. A door stood slightly open. It was not his Dorit, was the small room at the end of the hall. His son's room. He could not remember the last time he stood. Or maybe months, maybe longer. He stayed still for a moment. The house felt even quieter. His hand rested on the wall as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He told himself he was tired. That was always the reason. Work always came first. There were deals to close, people to manage, futures to secure. That was what he believed, yet his feet moved without permission. He pushed the door open. Slowly, the room was dimly. A small lamp was on near the bed. Soft light touched the walls. He expected something else expensive. Toys, bright screens, everything money could buy, but what he saw made his chest tighten. The room was simple, not empty, but not loud either. There was a small bed with a blanket folded carefully, a shelf with books worn at the edges, say. Few toys placed neatly, not scattered on the wall were drawings, many drawings. Some were crooked, some had faded color, some were taped carelessly. Stepped inside quietly as if someone might wake up. His eyes moved from one drawing to another. Tall buildings, cars, stick figures holding hands. One figure was always taller than the rest. The man knew who that was. His throat felt dry. He had seen boardrooms filled with powerful people. He had signed papers worth millions. He had stood on stages with applause, but this small room felt heavier than all of that. He walked closer to the wall. One drawing showed a small figure standing alone near a window outside. The window was a car driving away. Below it were words written unevenly. Come home soon. His breath slowed. He sat on the edge of the bed. Mattress dipped slightly under his weight. The room smelled faintly of soap and paper, a smell he had never noticed. Before he looked around again, there was a desk near the window. On it lay pencils, some broken, some sharpened. A notebook sat closed beside them. He picked it up slowly. It felt light inside, were pages filled with writing, not neat, not perfect, but honest. Today I waited. Today he was busy. Tomorrow maybe. Page after page told the same story in different ways. School days lonely. Afternoons quiet. Dinners no complaints. Just waiting. He felt something press against his chest. It's feeling he did not like. It's feeling he did not know how to handle. He closed the notebook. His hand shook slightly. He stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the city lights glowed. The same city he ruled during the day. From up here, everything looked small, just like the boy who lived in this room. He remembered promises made quickly. We will go next week. I will come earlier tomorrow. Soon. Never arrived. He had convinced himself he was doing this for his family, for the future, for safety. But standing there, he wondered what future looked like without memories. He turned back toward the room. On the night table was a small clock beside. It lay, a folded piece of paper. He picked it up. Was a schedule written in childish handwriting. Days were marked. Some had small stars. Some had circles. One day had many lines around it. Beside it were words. Dad said he might come early. The word might stood out. He lowered himself back onto the bed. For the first time in years, his eyes burned. He had learned how to control emotions, how to hide weakness, how to stay calm in any storm. But this room was different. This room did not care about power. It only showed truth. He stayed there longer than he planned. Minutes passed, then more. He Thought of all the nights he walked past this door, all the times he chose emails over bedtime, all the moments that slipped away quietly, the house staff often spoke about how calm the boy was, how polite, how mature. How mature now, he understood why some children grow up fast. When they have two, he stood again and looked around one last time. This room did not ask for luxury, it asked for presence. He stepped out and closed the door gently. The hallway felt longer now. He did not return to his study. He went to his room, but did not sleep, though. Images stayed in his mind, the drawings, the words, the waiting for the first time. The man who owned everything felt like he had lost something important, and deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of a truth he could no longer ignore. He could not stop thinking about the room. Even as the sunlight filled his own bedroom, he could still see the small bed, the crooked drawings, and the notebook filled with words that seemed to speak directly to him. The world outside his mansion was moving fast as always, with meetings, calls, and endless responsibilities. But inside, he felt stuck, like time had slowed down in that small room where his son lived his quiet life. That morning, he avoided his usual routine. Breakfast sat untouched. Emails went unanswered. He found himself walking the halls slowly. Stopping at the door of the room he had only peeked into the night before. Something about it called to him. It was not about curiosity or guilt. It was something deeper. He wanted to understand the life his son was living, the life he had missed. He pushed the door open slowly. The room looked different in daylight. The drawings now had shadows that made them appear alive. Some colors that seemed dull at night now glowed softly in the morning sun. He walked toward the desk, the notebook still resting there. He picked it up again, almost afraid to look inside, yet unable to resist. He read the words slowly this time. The sentences were simple, childlike, but they carried weight beyond what he expected. I drew this for him, one page read. He will see it one day. Another page said, I miss my dad. Hope he comes soon. The words repeated a pattern of longing and hope, quiet faith that he would appear despite the empty hours and lonely nights. The man felt a lump in his throat. He had lived a life surrounded by people, yet none of them ever looked at him the way his son did in these pages. These words were not about money, power, or prestige. They were about presence, love, and a connection he had taken for granted. He sat on the bed again, letting the notebook rest on his lap. He began to notice details he had never seen before. The toys were simple, but cared for. A small wooden car had a wheel slightly loose, yet it was placed perfectly on the shelf. A stuffed animal had a patch on its ear, stitched carefully by his son's small hands. Everything told a story of patience, creativity, and a longing for attention. He moved to the wall. The drawings were messy, uneven, and yet full of life. Some were stick figures. Others had homes, trees, and skies colored in all the wrong shades, but somehow perfect in their imperfection. One drawing showed a small figure, holding the hand of a taller figure, the taller figure drawn in pencil, but still towering with importance. He knew that taller figure was him. His heart tightened. He had been a figure in his son's life, not a person. Someone distant and untouchable. Someone who existed mostly in imagination, not reality. The realization hit harder than any business failure ever could. He picked up a drawing that had a big red circle around it. It showed a father and son playing in the park, swinging high, with clouds and birds around them. At the bottom, written in uneven letters, were the words, "One day we will play like this." He closed his eyes, letting the memory of what could have been wash over him. Then his gaze fell on the desk again. Among the pencils and books, there was a small box taped shut. He opened it carefully and found old photographs. They were pictures of his son, alone smiling at a cake, holding a small toy, waving at the camera. In each photo, there was no one else. No father, no family member, no adult. He had missed every moment captured in these images. His hands shook slightly. It built an empire, but it had cost him moments like this. Moments that could never be bought, moments that could never be returned. The weight of it pressed down on him, heavier than any contract, heavier than any responsibility he carried outside these walls. He noticed a small calendar on the wall. Days were marked with stars, circles, and small drawings. Some had notes. "Wait for Dad," he said. "He might come. Birthday wish. Dad here?" The calendar was a map of hope, a record of waiting, and yet also a silent accusation. He had been absent too long, his eyes filled with tears, but he did not cry openly. He was not used to it, yet he allowed himself a moment to feel the pain fully. He sat there, letting the quiet of the room speak to him. The world outside could wait. Deals, meetings, and responsibilities could wait. For the first time in years, he felt that what truly mattered was not outside these walls, but inside this small room in the life of a child who loved him despite his absence. He picked up the notebook again and turned the pages with care. Some were drawings, others were short notes about school, dreams, and wishes. "I want to show him my drawing," one page read. "I hope he likes it. Wish we could go fishing," another note said. Each page told a story of a child growing up without the guidance and presence of a father who was always too busy to notice. He realized that his son had been trying to reach him in ways he could not ignore any longer. He had been sending messages through drawings, notebooks, and quiet signs, hoping his father would see them. And now he had. The man felt an overwhelming sense of guilt mixed with love. He thought about how many mornings he had left the house before his son woke, how many nights he had returned after the child was asleep, how many weekends he had missed. Each memory felt like a missed opportunity. It's a lost moment that could never be recovered. He sat on the bed for hours, sometimes reading, sometimes staring at the wall. He studied every drawing, every note, every small detail of the room. The more he looked, the more he understood his son's world. It was small, quiet, and full of longing, yet it had been filled with love for him all along. For the first time, he understood that presence was more valuable than presence. That love was shown not through gifts or grand gestures, but through time spent together. Through attention and care, through being there when it mattered most. He thought about the life he had been living, always chasing the next deal, the next goal, the next achievement. All of it had seemed important until now. Now, standing in this small room, he realized that nothing he had accomplished outside these walls could replace what he had missed in here. He noticed a small chair by the window, worn from use. He sat there, letting the sunlight fall on his face. He could see the city stretching out endlessly, but he did not care about the view. He cared about the boy who had waited for him. It's the boy who had filled this room with messages of hope, patience, and love. He made a quiet promise to himself. He would change. He would be there. He would not let the next day pass without truly being with his son. He did not know how it would happen, but he knew he had to try, as the morning turned into afternoon. He stayed in the room watching the small shadows move with the sun. He imagined his son coming home, seeing him there, finally present. The thought made his heart race and ache at the same time. He realized that this room was not just a room. It was a mirror, showing him what he had lost and what he could still gain. It was a message from his son, from a heart that loved unconditionally and waited patiently. The man felt a mix of sorrow and hope. Sorrow for the years lost, hope for the years still to come. He knew the path would not be easy. He would have to step away from work sometimes, say no to opportunities, and put his son first. But for the first time, he understood that this was the most important investment he could ever make. He left the room only briefly, returning to bring water and a small snack as if he were visiting a patient. He did not sit behind a desk or answer phone calls. He simply existed there in the quiet presence of the child he had missed so much. By evening, he was still in the house, pacing the hallway, thinking, remembering. Every detail of the room stayed in his mind. The drawings, the toys, the notebook, the calendar. Every moment had a voice now, a message he could not ignore. He realized that this room, simple and quiet, had changed him. It had shown him the truth he had been avoiding for years. Love was not measured in gifts, in wealth, or in power. Love was measured in moments, attention, and care. And he had been absent for far too long. That night, he stayed awake, thinking about how he would begin again, how he would repair the bond with his son, how he would be present not just in body but in mind and heart. The house was quiet, but inside him something had shifted. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. He had missed too much, and his son had grown in ways he had not witnessed. But he also knew that it was not too late. He could still be there. He could still show his son the love he had only begun to understand. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. A hope that presence could heal absence. A hope that love, no matter how delayed, could still find its way home. He could not stop thinking about the small room. Every detail stayed in his mind, the crooked drawings, the worn books, the small toys arranged carefully, and the notebook filled with words he had never noticed before. The quiet honesty of it all made him feel exposed in a way he had never felt in any boardroom, meeting, or negotiation. It was a different kind of power, one he had never known, the power of presence. The power of being noticed, of being wanted for who he really was. That morning he woke up unusually early. He did not rush to check emails or make calls. He dressed slowly, ate a small breakfast, and found himself wandering through the quiet halls of the mansion. The staff noticed the change but did not ask questions. They only observed the man who usually never stayed still, who always had somewhere else to be. Today, he had nowhere else to be but here, in the house. In the life he had neglected, he reached the door again, his hand lingering on the handle. It felt warm under his fingers, as if it were waiting for him. He opened it slowly and stepped inside. The morning sun spilled into the room, highlighting colors he had never seen before. The faded blue of a wall, the soft yellow of a curtain, the reds and greens of the drawings scattered everywhere. It was a small room, humble, imperfect, yet full of life. He walked toward the desk, where the notebook lay. He picked it up again and read. The words now seemed different. They were not just simple notes or drawings. They were a conversation he had missed, a silent dialogue between a child and the father who had been absent. "I hope he comes today," one line read. "I want to show him my project." Another said, "I made this drawing for him. I hope he likes it." Each line cut deeper than he expected. He realized that for years, his son had been waiting, hoping, imagining moments that never came. He had lived in a world of promises broken not out of cruelty but out of busyness. Every "I will come tomorrow" that never arrived had piled up. Leaving the boy to find ways to cope alone, he moved around the room, noticing small details. A small chair near the window was worn from use. He could see the indentations from where his son had sat for hours, doing homework, drawing, or simply looking outside. He picked up a pencil left on the desk, its tip broken, yet it had been sharpened carefully again and again. Each small act of care told him that his son had been trying to keep hope alive, even when no one else noticed. On the wall, he saw a collection of drawings he had not fully appreciated before. Some were simple stick figures. Some were small houses with trees and clouds. Some were abstract shapes colored with abandon. In every drawing, one figure stood taller than the others. He recognized it immediately. It was him, drawn in pencil, always looming, always present in imagination. But rarely in reality, he felt a lump form in his throat. He had built a life full of accomplishments, a life envied by many, yet it had cost him the moments that mattered most. The small room was a mirror reflecting the absence, the silence, and the longing he had caused. It was impossible to ignore. He picked up a small box that had been hidden under the desk. Inside were old photographs, mostly of his son alone. One showed him blowing out a birthday candle, smiling at the camera with excitement, yet without the father he had been waiting for. Another photo showed the child holding a small toy, looking out the window, perhaps hoping to see someone who never came. Each image was a reminder of time lost, of moments he could never reclaim. He sat on the bed again, the notebook resting on his lap. He read a page that made him pause. "I wish he would come home early today," it said. "I want to tell him about my day." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years of waiting. He realized how much he had underestimated the importance of being there, of showing up not just physically but emotionally. The room was silent, yet it spoke to him in a language he was only beginning to understand. The drawings, the notebook, the toys, and the photos were not just objects. They were messages, expressions of love, hope, and patience. They were attempts to reach out to a father who had been absent in body and mind. He felt tears welling up. It's unbidden and unstoppable. He had never cried in public, never shown vulnerability. Yet here, in this small room, surrounded by the quiet evidence of his son's life, he could not hold back. The tears were not just for the missed moments, but for the realization that love could not be measured in money, gifts, or grand gestures. It could only be measured in presence, attention, and care. He remembered a promise he had made long ago, a promise to always be there. He realized how many times he had failed, how many mornings he had left the house before his son woke, how many nights he had returned after the child was asleep, how many weekends, holidays, and simple afternoons he had sacrificed for work. Each memory pressed down on him, heavier than any responsibility he had carried outside these walls. He picked up the notebook again and turned the pages carefully. One page had a small drawing of a park, a swing, and two figures playing. The taller figure had a faint smile. The smaller figure's hands were stretched out in joy. At the bottom were words, "One day, we will play like this." He closed his eyes and felt the weight of what he had missed. He had been present in imagination, not in reality. He moved to the small bed, sitting carefully, afraid to disturb the order his son had created. He noticed the neatness, the care in placing every object. Even the small stuffed animal on the pillow had been positioned just right. Every detail spoke of thoughtfulness, patience, and a desire for connection. He looked around again, noticing the calendar on the wall. Days were marked with stars and circles, some notes written in childish handwriting. "Wait for Dad," he said. "He might come, birthday wish. Dad here." The calendar was more than just a record of days. It was a silent account of love, hope, and waiting. It was a record of absence and a plea for presence. He stayed in the room for hours, sometimes reading, sometimes staring at the wall. The sun moved across the sky, casting shadows that shifted with time. He noticed every detail, the slight crease in a drawing, the faded colors, the indentation on the desk from hours of writing. Each detail told a story he had never bothered to see before. He realized that his son had been trying to reach him, in every way possible. Through drawings, through notes, through simple acts of care, the boy had been sending messages of love and hope. And now, finally, he was listening. He felt an overwhelming mix of guilt and love. He thought about all the opportunities he had missed, all the moments he could never get back. But he also felt a flicker of hope. It was not too late to start again. It was not too late to be present. He made a quiet promise to himself. He would change. He would be there. He would prioritize his son above work, above deals, above everything else. He did not know how it would happen, but he knew he had to try. The man spent the day moving carefully around the room, noticing small things he had missed before. A pencil mark on the wall, a small toy car with a missing wheel, a folded piece of paper with a message never delivered. Each item told him something about the boy's life, about the patience and hope that had kept him going despite the father's absence by evening. He had read every page of the notebook, looked at every drawing, and examined every detail. He realized that the room had changed him. It had shown him the truth he had been avoiding for years. Love was not about money, about gifts, about appearances. Love was about time, attention, and presence. He left the room briefly to bring water and a small snack, but he did not return to his office or study. He stayed in the quiet of the hallway, thinking about how he would begin to rebuild the connection he had lost. He imagined small steps, coming home earlier, spending time in the afternoon, reading stories, playing games. He understood that it would take patience and effort, but he was ready. The night came, and he stayed awake, reflecting on what he had learned. The images of the room, the drawings, the notebook, and the calendar stayed in his mind. Every detail spoke to him, urging him to act, to be present, to be a father in reality, not just in imagination. He knew the journey would not be easy. He had missed too much, and his son had grown in ways he had not witnessed. But he also knew that it was not too late. He could still make a difference. He could still show his son that he was loved, valued, and important. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond business, beyond wealth, beyond success. His heart was focused on something far more important: rebuilding a bond, being present, and showing love in ways he had never understood before. As he finally lay down to sleep, he felt a small flicker of hope. Hope that presence could heal absence. Hope that love, even when delayed, could still reach its destination. Hope that tomorrow could be different, that he could finally begin to make up for all the lost moments. He woke up early again, the sunlight creeping through the large windows, painting soft golden lines across the floors. The mansion felt quieter than usual, as if it too was waiting for something. He didn't rush to check messages or calls. Those things no longer mattered as much as they used to. His mind kept returning to the small room at the end of the hall, the room where his son lived, where he had begun to understand the weight of absence and the meaning of presence. He dressed slowly, choosing comfort over formality. Today was not about meetings or appearances. Today he needed to be present, not in a room filled with luxury, but in a space filled with a child's life. He moved through the hallways, the polished floors echoing beneath his steps, and he felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. It had been years since he had truly spent time in that room, years since he had truly spent time with his son. He reached the door, his hand hovering over the handle. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had seen the drawings, the notebook, the small details that told stories of loneliness and hope. But seeing was not enough. Today he wanted to truly be there, to sit, to listen, to understand more than just words on paper. He pushed the door open gently, stepping inside. The room was bathed in morning light. The colors seemed brighter than yesterday. The drawings, once crooked and faded, now felt vibrant and alive. Each toy, each book, each small item carried a memory, a story, a message. He walked slowly, taking it all in. His eyes fell on the notebook, and he opened it again, reading a few lines. "I hope he stays today," one sentence said. "I want to show him my drawing." He swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. He moved toward the desk, sitting in the small chair near the window. The chair creaked under his weight, but he didn't mind. He wanted to feel the room as his son experienced it, to see the world through those small eyes for a moment. He looked out the window, the city spread out below like a sea of lights and buildings. But he wasn't interested in the view. He was interested in the boy who had waited for him, hoped for him, and made this room a place of silent communication. He noticed a small stack of papers beside the notebook. They were unfinished drawings, sketches, and little notes. He picked one up carefully. It was a drawing of a father and son walking in a park. The sun was shining, the birds flying, and the father's hand reached out to hold the child's. At the bottom, the words were written in uneven letters, "I hope we can walk together soon." He felt a tear slip down his cheek. It was the first time in years he had cried alone in his own house. And he didn't care. He put the drawing down and looked around the room again. He noticed the little details he had overlooked before: a small toy car with a missing wheel, a patch on a stuffed animal's ear, the indentation on the bed where his son had slept. Each detail spoke volumes. The boy had been patient, had cared for the things around him, had waited quietly for a father who often wasn't there. He remembered all the times he had left early, turned late, or canceled plans. Each memory felt heavier than the last. The realization hit him. He had been present in body, but absent in spirit. He had given everything money could buy, but he had given nothing of himself. And now, finally, he understood the cost of that absence. He opened the notebook again, reading line after line. "I drew this for him," one page said. "I hope he sees it and likes it," another line read. "I wish he would play with me." The words were simple, childlike, yet they carried a weight that no business deal, no contract, no amount of money could ever match. They were pure, honest, and filled with longing. He felt a deep ache in his chest. He had spent his life building an empire, yet the most important relationship, the one with his son, had been neglected. He realized that tears were not a sign of weakness, but a sign that he was beginning to feel again, beginning to understand. Beginning to care in a way he hadn't before, he stood and walked around the room. Picking up a small wooden toy that had been carefully placed on the shelf, he held it in his hand, remembering how his son must have played with it, cared for it, imagined stories around it. He placed it back gently, noticing the care with which every object had been arranged. It was a silent message. I am here. I have been waiting. I hope you notice me. He walked back to the bed, sitting down and letting the notebook rest on his lap. He read a page where his son had written about a school project, describing it in detail and hoping his father would be proud. I hope he likes what I made, the words said. He realized that for years his son had sought approval, recognition, and connection. He had wanted his father to be there, not for the gifts or praise, but for presence, for attention, for love. The man felt tears flowing freely now. He did not try to stop them. He let them fall, letting the weight of years of absence pour out. The room was silent, yet it spoke to him more than any conversation ever had. It told him that love was not measured in wealth, in achievements, in power, or in possessions. Love was measured in moments shared, in attention given, in presence offered freely and consistently. He thought about all the mornings he had missed, all the nights he had returned too late, all the weekends that had gone by without laughter, without play, without connection. He felt the depth of the loss, the magnitude of the missed experiences. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was hope. It was not too late. He could still begin. He could still be the father his son needed. He picked up the notebook and wrote a small note in his own hand. Something simple, something heartfelt. I am here now. I will be here. I am sorry for the times I was not. As night fell, he remained awake, thinking, planning, imagining. He imagined sitting with his son, playing games, reading stories, walking outside, laughing, sharing simple moments that could never be bought. He imagined evenings filled with conversation, mornings filled with connection, days filled with shared experiences. He knew the journey would not be easy. He had missed too much, and there were years to make up for. But he also knew that it was not too late. He could still be there. He could still show his son the love he had only begun to understand, for the first time in years. He felt a deep sense of purpose. Beyond wealth, beyond business, beyond power, he found a calling in being a father, in being present. In rebuilding a bond that had been neglected for too long, he lay down that night, exhausted yet hopeful. The room's images, the drawings, the notebook, and the calendar remained in his mind. Every detail spoke to him, urging him to act, to be present, to be a father not just in imagination, but in reality. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, he felt a flicker of hope, small but strong. Hope that presence could heal absence, that love, even when delayed, could still reach its destination, that tomorrow could be different, and that he could finally begin to make up for all the lost moments. He woke up early that morning with a strange lightness in his chest. The heaviness of regret was still there, but now it was mixed with determination. For the first time in years, he felt that he could do something real, something that mattered more than deals, more than money, more than all the success he had ever achieved. Today, he would begin to rebuild the bond he had neglected for so long. He went to his son's room quietly, taking care not to rush, not to startle. The door was slightly open, as if it had been waiting for him. He pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room was quiet, peaceful, familiar. The drawings still covered the walls, the notebook rested on the desk, and the small toys were arranged just as carefully as yesterday. But today it felt different. Today, it felt like a place where change could happen. His son was sitting at the desk, head bent over a drawing. When he looked up and saw his father, his eyes widened. There was a mix of surprise, hesitation, and hope in his gaze. The man smiled gently, a little nervously, and said, "Good morning. Can I sit with you?" His son nodded slowly, unsure, but willing. He moved his chair slightly to make room, and the father sat down beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. The room was filled with quiet, but it was a good quiet, quiet that held possibility. He reached for a pencil and picked up a sheet of paper. "Can I draw with you?" he asked. His voice was soft, tentative. His son's lips curved slightly, a small smile appearing for the first time in years that was entirely for him. They began to draw together, awkwardly at first. The father had not drawn in years, and his son had not drawn with him before. But slowly, the tension melted, and they found a rhythm. As they drew, the father noticed small details he had never seen before. The way his son held the pencil, the way he concentrated on colors, the careful thought put into each line. It was amazing to see him, not as someone who needed supervision or guidance, but as a young person full of talent, patience, and imagination. They drew for hours, talking in small, careful sentences. His son told him about school, about friends, about projects and hobbies. For the first time, the father listened fully, without distractions, without checking his phone, without thinking about business. He asked questions, and when his son answered, he nodded, really listened, really cared. Lunch came, but they barely noticed. The day passed slowly, filled with small moments that were new and yet familiar. They built a small model together, the father following instructions carefully, the son laughing when things went slightly wrong. The sound of his son's laughter was something the father had forgotten existed, and now it filled the room, warm and bright. After lunch, they moved outside. The sun was shining, the air was warm but gentle. They walked slowly in the garden, talking about simple things, flowers, birds, the clouds. The father realized that he had spent so many years chasing things that did not matter. While the world outside had been offering simple pleasures, simple connections, simple love, all along they played catch, and for the first time, he truly felt the joy of being with his son. He noticed how his son's eyes sparkled, how his smile widened with each throw, how his laughter echoed through the yard. It was not about winning or losing, it was about being present, about being together. By the evening, they returned to the house, tired but happy. The father realized that he had learned more in this single day than in years of business meetings, negotiations, and travel. He had learned what mattered most: presence, attention, love, and care. These were the things that could not be bought, the things that could not be delegated, the things that had been missing in his life for far too long. That night, he sat with his son again, reading a story from a book. He read slowly, using different voices for the characters, watching as his son listened, enraptured. The boy asked questions, made comments, and for the first time, the father responded not as a businessman, not as a provider, but as a parent, as someone who cared deeply, who was present in every word, in every pause. In every smile, they finished the story, and the father tucked his son into bed. He sat beside him for a moment, holding his hand gently. "I'm sorry I wasn't here before," he said softly, "but I will be here now. Every day, I promise." His son looked at him, eyes wide but trusting, and nodded. "I know," he whispered. "I've waited for you." The father felt tears come again, but this time they were not just tears of regret, they were tears of hope, of love, of a bond beginning to grow stronger. He kissed his son on the forehead and left the room slowly, leaving the door slightly open, letting the warmth and trust linger. Over the next days and weeks, he continued to show up. He adjusted his schedule, delegated responsibilities, and made time for moments that truly mattered. They played together, read together, laughed together, and even sometimes argued, but always with connection, always with presence. Each day built on the last, slowly mending the gaps created by absence. The small room began to change as well. It was still filled with drawings and toys, but now it was filled with laughter and shared moments. The father added his own drawings to the wall, small notes to the notebook, and little surprises for his son. The boy responded with drawings, stories, and hugs, and the room became a living testament to their growing bond. One evening, as they sat together looking out the window at the city lights, the father realized something profound. He had spent years measuring success in money, power, and achievements. Now he understood that the true measure of wealth was the time spent with those you love, the moments shared, the connections nurtured. He felt richer than ever before, not because of what he had, but because of who he had in his life. He looked at his son, who was leaning against him, drawing quietly. The boy looked up and smiled, and the father smiled back. For the first time, he felt complete. Not because of business, not because of money, not because of reputation, but because of love, presence, and the bond he had fought to rebuild. They continued like this, slowly, day by day. The father learned patience, the son learned trust, and together they built a relationship filled with honesty, care, and connection. The small room, once a silent witness to absence and longing, became a symbol of love, hope, and new beginnings. Years later, the father would still remember those first days, the nervousness, the tears, the uncertainty. But he would also remember the laughter, the drawings, the shared stories, and the moments that truly mattered. He learned that it was never too late to start again, never too late to be present, and never too late to show love in ways that money could never buy. The small room at the end of the hall, once a place of silence and longing, was now a room of life, warmth, and connection. And for the billionaire who had once thought he had everything, he finally understood what true wealth really was. It was not in the buildings, the cars, or the money. It was in the simple moments, the presents given freely, and the bond built with a child who had always loved him, even in his absence. And as they sat together, drawing, laughing, and talking about dreams for the future, he knew that he had found something far more valuable than anything he had ever achieved. He had found his son. He had found love. He had found the true meaning of life. The tears that had once fallen in sorrow now fell in gratitude. The heart that had once been heavy with regret was now full of hope. And in the quiet of the room, in the simple act of being present, he realized that happiness was not something to be earned. It was something to be shared, something to be lived, something to be built with those who matter most. The billionaire had finally come home, not just to the mansion, not just to his wealth, not just to his responsibilities, but to the life that had always been waiting for him at the small end of the hall. In the room where love, patience, and presence had always been ready to teach him what truly mattered. This completes the full story in 5 parts. Fully human-centered, emotional, and engaging. With simple natural language suitable for YouTube storytelling. If you want, I can also compile all 5 parts into a single polished document ready for YouTube narration, keeping it in smooth, flowing style for video script format. Do you want me to do that? Write Part 6 in 2,000 words, without heading in simple English words in a separo-tedecument. It should be interesting. And every part should be engaging, so the audience doesn't get bored. Also keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also make the script human-centric, and don't give feel of AI generated. Also don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. Also don't use names like Marcus, Sarah, Emma, Jamal, etc. Write immediately. Here's Part 6 written in the same detailed, human-centered, engaging style you requested. The next morning, he woke up with a quiet determination that felt different from anything he had known. There was a soft light in the house, and for the first time, it did not feel empty. He moved slowly through the halls, not as a man chasing deadlines, but as a father who had found purpose. The mansion, large and silent, no longer felt cold. It now felt like a home, filled with possibilities for moments he could spend with his son. He went to the small room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open, and he could hear the faint scratching of a pencil. His son was already up, sitting at the desk, drawing with the same care he had always shown. When he saw his father, he froze for a moment, unsure. But then a small smile appeared, the kind of smile that held trust, hope, and the memory of new beginnings. The father sat beside him. "Good morning," he said softly. "Can I join you today?" His son nodded, and for the first time in a long time, they started the day together, side by side. Not as a parent who appears briefly, not as a man who leaves before the day begins, but as a father who was fully present. They began by drawing together. The father was not skilled with pencils, not careful like his son, but that didn't matter. They laughed at the mistakes, corrected each other gently and slowly. The room became filled with a lightness neither had felt before. He noticed how much his son had grown, not just in height, but in imagination, patience, and thoughtfulness. The drawings were no longer just expressions of loneliness. They were conversations, ways to connect, ways to communicate love and creativity. After drawing, they moved to the window. The father had brought a small notebook, and he asked his son if they could write a story together. His son's eyes lit up. For the next hour, they wrote about adventures in imaginary lands, talking through ideas, suggesting changes, and laughing at silly parts. The father realized that in these simple acts, in these shared moments, he was learning to see the world through his son's eyes. He was learning patience, imagination, the quiet joy of connection. As the day passed, they built a small model of a house together, using wooden pieces that had been tucked away in a corner. His son explained each step carefully, his excitement growing with every addition. The father listened, asked questions, and made suggestions. Not as a teacher or boss, but as a partner. As someone who cared deeply and was finally learning how to nurture and guide. By the afternoon, they moved outside into the garden. The sun was warm, the air fresh, and the world seemed full of life. They played simple games, catch, running races, and hide and seek. The father had forgotten the joy of being small in someone's world, sharing energy, laughter, and fun without worry or stress. His son laughed freely, his voice ringing through the garden. And for the first time, the father felt the full weight of happiness. Later, they sat under a tree, catching their breath. His son rested his head on his father's shoulder. The father felt the warmth of connection he had never known in his adult life. "I'm glad you're here," his son whispered. "I've waited a long time." The father's heart tightened, a mixture of sorrow and joy flooding through him. He whispered back, "I'm here now. I will stay." They returned to the room as the sun began to set. The father noticed small details, the way the drawings had shifted with sunlight. The gentle indentation of the chair his son had used, the tiny patchwork of care on toys that had been loved for years. He realized how much effort, thought, and love his son had invested in this small space, a space that had waited for him to notice. That evening they prepared a small dinner together. It was simple, but the act of cooking, sharing, and laughing at mistakes created a bond stronger than any material gift. They spoke about their day, about the drawings, the stories, the games, and even the small frustrations. For the first time, there was open communication, a shared understanding that had been missing for years. After dinner, they sat in the room, reading stories aloud. The father used different voices, creating characters, making his son laugh, asking questions, and listening to answers. It was not just a reading, it was a conversation, a lesson in presence, a way to rebuild trust and love. The father noticed how engaged his son was, how his eyes sparkled, how his laughter filled the room. Each small moment reinforced what he had begun to understand, that love could not be measured by gifts or absence, but by attention, time, and care. The father opened the notebook again, the one that had once held words of longing and hope. He began to write small notes inside, short messages to his son, simple statements of love and presence. "I'm proud of you," one note read. "I'm here to listen. I will spend time with you every day." He placed them carefully beside the drawings, and when his son saw them, his eyes widened. There was no doubt, no hesitation, only recognition, trust, and growing love. The night came, and they continued to talk quietly. The father shared stories from his own childhood, lessons he had learned, mistakes he had made, and the dreams he had once held. His son listened intently, asking questions, offering ideas, and sharing his own thoughts. The room, once silent and lonely, was now filled with the hum of connection, laughter, and love. As he tucked his son into bed, he realized that this was more than a single day. This was the beginning of a new life, a new pattern, a new understanding. The mistakes of the past could not be erased, but they could be acknowledged, learned from, and slowly healed. He held his son's hand, feeling the warmth, the trust, the quiet bond that had begun to grow stronger. "I will be here tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after," he promised softly. "I will not leave you again." Over the following weeks, the father continued to show up fully. Work became a part of life, but no longer the center. He attended school events, helped with projects, played games, and shared quiet moments. The room that had once been a place of waiting and longing became a place of life, warmth, and growth. Drawings now included the father, not just in pencil, but in presence, in shared experiences. In laughter, the small moments accumulated morning drawings. Afternoon walks, evening stories, shared meals, laughter, and even tears. Each moment rebuilt the bond that had been stretched thin by years of absence. The father learned patience, attention, empathy, and care. The son learned trust, confidence, and the joy of being seen and loved fully. One evening, as they looked out the window together, watching the city lights twinkle, the father realized how much he had learned. Success, money, and power could provide comfort, security, and recognition, but they could not replace love, presence, and connection. He had been wealthy in every material sense, yet poor in the one way that truly mattered. Now, he was wealthy in the richest sense of all. They continued to grow together, day by day, moment by moment. The father's presence became consistent, reliable, and loving. The son flourished in ways he never could have imagined, supported, understood, and cherished. The small room at the end of the hall, once a symbol of absence and longing, became a symbol of love, healing, and hope. The billionaire finally understood the true meaning of wealth. It was not in buildings, cars, or money. It was in the simple moments shared, the presence given freely, and the bond built with someone who truly mattered. And in those moments, in that quiet room, he had found the most valuable thing he had ever lost: his son, his love, and a life truly worth living. He knew that challenges would still come, and life would still be busy. But the lessons of the small room, the drawings, the notebook, and the laughter would guide him. He had learned that love is not about grand gestures, but about being there consistently, attentively, and wholeheartedly. That understanding now shaped every choice he made. As the night settled, they sat together quietly, holding hands, looking at the stars outside the window. The father felt a deep peace. The son leaned against him, content and safe. The journey of rebuilding had begun, and it would continue, slow but steady, day by day. In the quiet of the night, in the warmth of connection, he finally understood that this was what life had always been meant for: not wealth, not fame, not power, but love, presence, and the bond between father and son. And in that small, once lonely room, laughter now echoed, drawings now told shared stories, and the father finally knew what it meant to truly come home.